Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning, listeners. You're on Big Little Small Talk on 40dB. Today's a very special day. I've got a very special guest here. He is the secretary of the Harlaxton RSL sub-branch, and we're out at the cemetery, and it's a special day. There's going to be a big celebration. I'll just introduce you. We're speaking today with Mike Gowdie.
Hello, listeners. Yeah, Mike Gowdie speaking.
All the way. So, Mike, describe where we are now. Where are we?
Drayton Cemetery. There is a war cemetery at Drayton, but today there were quite a few throughout Australia, and they've managed to locate around 30 ex-servicemen who, after World War I, were buried in paupers' graves. There were no markings, and the records weren't very well looked after, and the local research society has identified where these graves are, and there'll be a headstone with a plaque on today unveiled at these grave sites.
So it's a service of dedication today, and tell me is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, it's a service of dedication, yes.
And are these services going on all around Australia?
Not necessarily today. If you can imagine that this cemetery in Toowoomba has 30 odd, you can imagine by the thousands throughout Australia that have the same problem. After World War I, the families had little money, and the servicemen came back and had no work, and they were on the street as swaggies and all sorts of things like that. In fact, in Toowoomba, down the bottom of the range, was a camp for these people. So if they passed away, they ended up being buried as paupers.
Right. Yes, that's very interesting. So that's in Redwood Park, isn't it?
Right,
it's the
yes.
And I think it's trying to be protected. I don't think it's a heritage listed site yet, but I think its history is undeniable and should be protected for sure.
Well, that's right. All these people, due to circumstances, they would have all had families. So due to circumstances, they weren't around to assist them. The other thing is, as the veterans of today, they leave the services after serving overseas, and they have medical issues, mental issues, and I guess it was probably worse after World War I. I think no one looked after them.
That's right. So, I mean, today we're recognising PTSD and things, and I guess in those days people thought that returned soldiers had shell shock and they just had to get on with it, didn't they?
Well, look, that's right. There were some terrible things, and probably the history books will show that happened. Shell shock wasn't recognised as a mental issue, and a lot of terrible things happened to soldiers in World War I.
Exactly. So now today is not Remembrance Day celebration. That's on Thursday when this interview, I think, will be played. So it's a different celebration.
Well, that's right. I think it probably was a convenient time to have it. Today we've sort of got a look at remembering people that did serve in World War I, and I suppose a lot of people will leave here today with that a memory that'll go forward with them to the Remembrance Day service.
That's right. So the Remembrance Day is the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, marks the moment the guns fell silent on the Western Front after the bloodshed of World War I. And I see on the RSL website, which is a fantastic website by the way, the theme this year for Remembrance Day is to remember to remember. And Mike, if I could, I'm just going to get you to read this out for me. I'm going to hand you this piece of paper, and if you could just read that out for me there.
No problem. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.
It's beautiful, and that is the Ode of Remembrance. Yes.
That's correct. That's quite a commonly spoken at any RSL service, Anzac Day, whether it be remembering Vietnam or remembering Korea, whatever. That is the one that's it's used in the UK as well. So it's not just the Commonwealth forces. It's a common sort of a thing for them. Yeah.
Right, it's beautiful, isn't it? And it's I think I read somewhere where it's only a couple of stanzas from a poem. Was it a French poet? I don't know the history. Well, I'm going to ask you some of the history because I'm someone who doesn't come from a military background, and what I've picked up along the way is probably only from being at official ceremonies. So I see we talked about the theme this year is remember to remember. So to remember to dedicate 1 minute to those people who gave their lives in service of their country, those who returned home injured or ill, and those who bravely serve our country today. So, Mike, tell me about remembering to wear a poppy. What's the symbol of the poppy?
Look, some years ago now, I went on a personal tour through the war, where the battles were fought in France, and what I didn't realise, and probably I went at the right time, that the poppy is called the weed of Flanders, and what happened was after all the shells had obliterated the landscape, the first thing that came up were the poppies with the red flower, and you went over there, and I sort of didn't expect to see as many as I did. They're growing in wheat fields, they're going beside the road, everywhere there, and but they're such a beautiful thing. Probably the farmers over there don't think the same way. If they harvest their wheat, they end up with a bin full of poppies as well. So.
But to us, they're such a beautiful symbol, aren't they? So why on Anzac Day then do we use rosemary?
Not too sure, but I think rosemary is a sort of a Middle Eastern thing, and probably it may have started in the Gallipoli campaign. It's a wild plant too that grows in very harsh climates, and so I think it's used as a item of remembrance as well.
Right, and another theme is to remember to commemorate. So what sort of celebrations are happening in Toowoomba and the Darling Downs on Remembrance Day?
Well, look, I think right throughout the Downs, especially in towns where there is an RSL presence, there'll be on the 11th month, 11th hour, there will be a ceremony, big or small, to recite these things and have a thought to what caused all this, but also too, I think, I'm of a generation that had touched bases with World War I veterans, World War II veterans, Korean, Vietnam veterans, and now the present young fellows that from Afghanistan, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what we're remembering, not necessarily their failing to return home, but when they returned home, you've got to remember that of all these conflicts, they came home damaged, either mentally or physically, and I think that's remembering to support them is one of the themes I'd like to think.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because my next dot point is remembering to help. So that veterans need help. Often they might just be having their lawn mowed or going shopping, or most importantly to have a chat. So tell me about the Harlaxton RSL, the sub-branch. Tell me your role there.
I'm the secretary, and I'm probably the contact point for a lot of different other organisations, and some of the state government, I won't actually mention any of them, who look after people with mental problems. We are a point of call when they have someone who has no local relatives, and we provide assistance. We provided for some of them food parcels. We mow their lawns. So that's those sort of people. Also, we have members and ex-servicemen who for whatever reason aren't living at home anymore. So we assist them with those same sort of things. Yeah.
So if you're just a member of the community and you'd like to be able to help, is that something that just members of the community can do?
Look, we actually do have members within our sub-branch. We call them sort of social members. Yeah, a lot of them have a connection with their relatives, but never actually served in the Defence Force, and they're very active within our sub-branch. So we can provide plenty. Our women's auxiliary have a on the second Monday of every month, open the doors at the North Toowoomba Bowls Club for people from nursing homes. Some of them are veterans, they're husbands, wives, and non-service people, and that gives the ladies something to feel that they're doing in the community, and the sub-branch assists with those as well.
Okay. And of course, you couldn't operate, I wouldn't imagine, without money. So that's remember to donate, I think.
Well, donate, but the sub-branches runs a stall at North Point Shopping Centre prior to all the important events during the year, and Anzac Day, Long Tan Day, and Remembrance Day. So Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday we'll have our stall down there. We just hope that people will drop in and say hello. We get a lot of people. We're not pressuring them to join the RS or anything like that, but they want to have a chat. There's young ladies with their children in prams say, oh, my husband is out at Kabala or is out at Oakey or got out recently and is working somewhere. So it's a place to have a conversation with people.
That's right. It's terrific, isn't it? I'll just remind listeners we're in our segment called Big Little Small Talk on 4DDB 102.7 FM, and we're here today at the Drayton Cemetery, and we're speaking to Mike Gowdie, who's the secretary of the Harlaxton RSL sub-branch, because we're here for a service of dedication for World War I veterans who were in unmarked graves.
Exactly.
I hope I've got that right, if I'm a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mike, tell me about the band. You're in the band as well. You're not only the secretary of the sub-branch, you're the president of the band. Have I got that right?
That's right. Look, a lot of the band now, and they're getting on a bit, spent their Citizens and Military Forces and Army Reserve career in Defence Force bands. So we formed the band over 30 years ago after we left the Defence Force to sort of keep that camaraderie together. And we've been going for that long, so we specialise, for want of a better word, in these sort of events. We have that sort of military background that we know what the particular music is to be paid for certain things. And,
right. So you are all ex-military.
We started off like that. Now we're open to. We've got youngsters in their 20s up to the geriatrics like me and the ex-military people.
What's your instrument? What do you play?
I play the tuba. Yeah.
Tuba. And how did you learn to play the tuba?
I started at primary school on a very small instrument, and as I got bigger, I got shanghaied into a bigger instrument.
Is that right? So you didn't start on a small tuba, you started
on a cornet.
Triangle. No.
That was the only thing available.
Okay.
As a kid in those days, every town had a town band, and I started there. And,
right.
And probably that was when I was about 9 years old, and I'm in my 70s now, so
you've been
a
playing
long
music.
history.
And all of the members there, do you practice? Do you
We practice once a week. A couple of Ian Corkle and myself we're both national servicemen as well. We got called up, but I was lucky enough to spend my whole of my service career in Defence Force bands. Corky, unfortunately, they discovered he was a great trombone player, but they needed school teachers.
Oh, okay.
So he ended up doing his national service as a teacher.
Right.
And then came back into the banding, reserve band part.
Yeah. So I can imagine the, as you said, the camaraderie, and that's it's all about that connection, isn't it? Connection to people who understand what you've been through and the the experiences that you had, that common experience, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think to a certain extent, our wives realised that I think they were under the misapprehension once we left the Defence Force that was the end of it, but we found a way to keep together and to do what we love, and that's playing music.
Yeah. I mean, it's your tribe, isn't it? It's
it is.
Not only that shared experience of the military, but it's the music and releasing all those endorphins when you sing and play music.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, tell me about the ambassador for Remembrance Day this year. It's Curtis McGrath, isn't it? Do you know much about him?
I'm afraid I can't. I've seen it. I've seen the photos, but no.
Seen him. Well, he's got an incredible story. So he's that Para-Olympian gold medalist who lost both of his legs when he stepped on an explosive device in in Afghanistan, and now he's he won in the para canoe. He's a gold medalist in the para canoe. So I guess it's not just sort of older people who are having these experiences, and it's great to have a face like that you know, you sort of go on to even bigger and better things. But I suppose when I looked at him, I thought, that's great that he then has an Olympic career. But I suppose most of us are just middle of the road, aren't we? We just try and get on with our lives, and So the service will be for Remembrance Day will be at the Mothers Memorial, I gather, and that's where you always meet. So just going back to the sub branch, you have an actual building, don't you?
No, we rent some floor space at the North Toowoomba Bowls Club, corner 11 Austin Elworthy Street. We have the whole top floor. So the band practices there, the sub branch has an office there. We meet there on a regular basis. And prior to COVID, the sub branch had and the Bowls Club had a very good function room with catering. But COVID has sort of done a lot of damage to all these shows. So we actually meet once a month at a variety of hotel type for a meal, about 20 or 30 of us, to keep that sort of thing going.
Yes,
take your wives along and keep them involved.
Right.
Keep them happy.
Well, that's what they say, happy wife, happy life. And you reckon that's a pretty good saying, right? Now, just tell me quickly what will happen today. What will be involved today? I see a lot of horses and horse floats over there.
Well, that's right. In all these ceremonies, they generally have a catafalque party. That's an old French word about the guards for a memorial. And they're normally school cadets or regular army people provide that guard with weapons and all that to guard the memorial. And today the Australian Light Horse Troop, they're a historical troop, providing that catafalque party around the memorial. It's only a temporary memorial because there isn't going to be a specific memorial for at the moment anyway. I'm not too sure whether there's planned for in the future for all these war graves. Of course, there is there's a regular one down below there where the Wall of Remembrance is. So, and there is the actual what would you call legal commemorative war graves down there, that were recognised as war graves. So they're down at the same place.
Okay,
just down there.
Okay.
So all these people were buried in a war grave. So they've been identified, and now they have a headstone, and it's just honouring their service. There's one just over there if you want to have a look. It's got the Australian Rising Sun, the person's military number, and his name.
And who did all of that research and found all of those graves?
I think it was Lindsay Morrison from the Toowoomba RSL was the leader locally, did all the research, and I think pretty sure the local historical society aided him to actually put him in the right direction to find some of these families. And
this is not the first year that you've had it?
This is the very first year.
This is the first year,
and it's only in the last year or two that the research has been done Australia-wide, and local RSL, perhaps in other towns maybe that don't have an RSL, maybe the local historical society are actually working along that lines. Yeah, the Defence Force has records of people, and then you've got to go through some sort of local, records from, for the graves, from whoever organised these cemeteries.
Right. Oh wow, I didn't realise that this was the first time. Well, that is just truly, it's an honour to be here. And you did mention before about some of the issues, I guess, that the veterans came home with, and I am going to speak to someone that you know, Alison Witenden, who is is a veterans advocate, and she will sort of tell us some more about the work that she's doing for veterans. So that'll be another interesting sort of part of this interview. But Mike, I thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's just been a joy to interview you and hear about your experiences with the Harlaxton sub-branch. I usually throw a curly question into these interviews, something like who's your favourite royal, or what's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor, but I feel like that would be a bit too frivolous today to have something like that. But I do like to ask people who are community sponsors of 40dB why you sponsor 40dB and why do you believe in community radio?
Well, I think we are part of the community, and there somewhere we can speak to other like members. I'm surprised how many of our older veterans actually listen to 4DB. They got it in their sheds while they're doing whatever they're doing, or in their iPods when they're mowing the lawn or something. But it is surprising what the general listening public.
Right, and that's how you can reach people.
That's
wonderful.
Right.
Well,
yes.
that'll do us, I think. Yeah. That's terrific. Thanks again, Mike.
No worries.
That's terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're back in our segment called Big Little Small Talk, and I'm here at the World War I Unmarked Graves Memorial Service. And as I tend to do, I struck up a conversation with someone standing next to me. Now, I'd like you to introduce yourself, Jim, and tell me what you do and what you do with return veterans or at people's funerals. You were telling me a very interesting story before.
Yes. My name's Jim Danskin. I'm been a member of the Toowoomba sub-branch since 1981, and I am currently the team leader of the funeral team.
And what does that involve? What do you do?
On the passing of a veteran, the funeral directors will ask if there's military service, and if there is, they will offer the RSL Poppy service, which is a free service that the RSL offers. I then go to archives and obtain a statement of service for the deceased veteran, and we attend the funeral. We read out his statement of service, we play the last post, say the ode, and we play Reveille. We remove the flag from the coffin, which is presented to the widow or the next of kin nominated. The funeral team will then place poppies on the coffin, then they will ask serving or ex-service men and women to place a poppy if they so wish, followed by the family members.
Lovely. And has this been a service that has always been available for veterans, or is it something relatively new?
It has been going for some time. I've been doing it for 21 years now, and I'm sure there was people before me.
Mm-hmm. But now it's kind of a bit more official, is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's a laid down RSL service which is published every year in our diary we get.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brief, but it's an extremely moving service.
Yes, and you said before that unfortunately you're doing more and more services now, are you? And
we were doing about 100 a year 5 years ago. So far this year we've done 43, I think.
mm-hmm.
And what we're seeing now are the guys that did their national service back in the 50s, because they're all 85, 86.
Right.
And with the passing of our World War II veterans, probably next in line comes the Vietnam guys.
Mm-hmm. And is it only at funeral home parlours, or is it, if people have a service sort of out in the park or something, that it's available for everyone, is it?
Yes, we go along with whatever the family wants. Sometimes they want to have the service in the chapel, sometimes they want to have it at the graveside, and I have on occasion gone to different clubs around town and done just a memorial service because they were unable to hold a funeral and they wanted to honour the veterans, so we've held a memorial service for them.
Well, Jim, you've been to a lot of funerals. I would imagine the thought crosses your mind sometimes about your own funeral, and you think, do I want it like this? Don't I want it like this? I want a good one. What constitutes a good funeral, dare I ask?
Well, for a veteran, I think it's the fact that it has to be very solemn. The presentation of the flag, I think, and I turn 83 in December, and it's been suggested I should give it away, but I say why? I know we're helping people. I love talking to people, and I'll know when it's time to walk away.
Oh, good on you. I love that spirit. That's terrific. Thanks for your time, Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
I've found another person to speak to, as I do, standing next to someone standing around at the World War I Unmarked Graves project. And there's a fellow here called Dieter, who I started speaking to. Now, Dieter, could you introduce yourself and tell me what your official role here today was?
Yeah, full name is Dieter Hitchens. I was the flag marshal, so raised and lowered the flag. in dangerous circumstances, I might add.
Why was that?
Though I wasn't expecting 4 horse rear ends pointing at me, so that was rather interesting.
They were interesting, the horses today. I wonder why they were a bit spooked. They just wouldn't stand still, would they?
No, that's working. What do they say about working with children
Don't
and animals?
work with children and animals.
That's right.
Now, Dieter, when you introduced yourself, I told you the story that I'd been to school with a fellow called Dieter Gertschwitz, and you said, yes, well, I've got part German, and you told me a story about your 2 grandfathers. Can you tell that story to the listeners?
That's right, absolutely. So my surname is Hitchens, as I said. Dad was British, actually born in a German camp that was based after the war. So he was actually born in Wiesbaden, Germany, but he's a British citizen. My mum's family from Germany, her surname was Schultz. Both of my grandparents served during World War One, and when their children met and got together, and they discovered that they had both not only served during World War One, but also served during the same campaign at the same location.
So you had 2 grandfathers fighting on different sides.
Different sides, exactly.
Wow, that is an incredible story.
It is.
Yeah.
Pretty scary also.
Do you know sort of what the outcome of that battle was?
No, I don't. I'm still trying to put the pieces together, so to speak. Conversation I was having with a gentleman before was trying to find someone that can do some more research on the German side of things, just to try to discover and put those 2 pieces together. But,
right.
Yeah.
And Dieter, tell me about the badges that you've got on here. One is this one.
I can't even see.
They're probably not. It's a fighter.
F-111, isn't it? Yeah. So I served in the Royal Australian Air Force for 12 years. I was a aircraft spray painter. One of my roles was working on the F-111. You may or may not be familiar with the deseal reseal issue with the fuel tanks. Sadly, they discovered many years later that the chemicals we were working with was toxic. People have died, suffered cancers, all sorts of things. So I was in the middle of that. I was a spray painter. The guys get in, deseal the fuel tank. We got in, cleaned it, painted it, and they'd come back in and reseal it. Spent 4 years at Amberley.
Right, interesting. I was talking to Jim just before, and we talked a little bit about his story and what he does at the funerals. And he said when you were wearing, I thought that might have been that badge. Is it a German badge that you wear? Or?
Yes, I normally when I'm like Anzac Days, I'll wear both my granddad's medals, which tends to grab some attention because they see anyone familiar with medals recognises the British medals straight away. But then they see like the German cross underneath and they go, what the?
Right.
So
I can imagine that would be quite a tricky line for you to walk. I mean, it's just how it is. It's the history. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in Australia who have heritage from all over, and to sort of think that we're at war. I suppose it's the insanity of war, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, even during the war, there's plenty of stories about ceasefires would happen, and the Brits and the Germans would get up in no man's land and swap photos of their children, and hand over cigarettes and things like that. So in essence, they were doing a job. The animosity, I think, seemed to sort of dissipate after the war. Mm-hmm. I know Mum, as a young girl, she went over to England and became an au pair in England, and that was not long after World War II. And she was welcomed, and there was no sort of animosity shown towards her.
It's just the story of our lives and the melting pot, I guess, and the diversity of Australia's culture. Yeah. Dieter, thank you very much for telling me your story. It was wonderful.
Megan.
Thank you. Now, listeners, I have another person who I'd like you to meet. This is someone I met yesterday, quite coincidentally. I didn't know that I was coming out to I knew I was coming out to the World War I unmarked graves ceremony today, but this was someone that I met just serendipitously, and her name is Alison. I'll get her to introduce herself in a minute, and she's a veteran as well, and she will tell you about what she's done in the military. and about what she's planning to do now, or perhaps with her work, and where she's going to go, the important work. And we spoke earlier with Mike about some of the people who came back with shell shock, as they called it in the old days. Now it's PTSD and all of the associated things that go with that. So good morning, Alison, and thank you for coming and meeting me today and talking about your work. So can you tell the listeners who you are and what work you're doing?
Yes, hello. My name is Alison. So I'm basically a ex-military major serving in the Australian Army, and I graduated from Duntroon at 18. I'm now nearly 50, and served in the military for nearly 20 years in Medical Corps, and served overseas on a deployment as a part of that, and then ended up in Toowoomba where my husband was based at Oakey.
Okay. Now, you're not in the military any longer.
No.
Yeah. And where did you serve?
So I served in Rwanda in 1995 with the United Nations, with the Australian contingent that went over there.
Right. And how long were you there for?
It was probably January till the end of October, so a good 8-9 months all up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you were in a military hospital?
Yes, so we were the Australians were running the UN hospital that was based in Kigali in Rwanda, and we looked after basically any of the children and individuals that resulted from the massacre that occurred, and we also looked after any of the UN personnel and the UN civilians.
Right. And I mean, I can't imagine some of the horrors of some of the things that you saw there. And we talked yesterday about what happens to people when they come out of the military. So, you know, I'd like for you to sort of talk to listeners about the work that you want to do with advocacy for veterans. So I know that just some of the statistics, that veterans are 4 times more likely to have a heart attack. They're twice as likely to have restless leg syndromes. They're 3 times as likely to act out dreams while asleep, to have twice as likely to have stomach ulcers. So what does an advocacy role look like?
An advocacy role looks like a carer, a helper, a friend, somebody that can help veterans not just returning from war. I think we focus too much on veterans that just return from war. Even in peacetime, you're living a very unique experience in the military, a very unique experience, and it's a life that you can't really explain to a civilian because it becomes just your life. It's your world, it's your family, and then when you leave it, be it having overseas service or not, to be honest, it's a loss. Mm-hmm. It's like losing your family.
A grieving process, in a way.
It's a very big grieving process. Add to that operational service, and it's all sorts of problems can occur with veterans. And so my role as an advocate is to help veterans navigate the very, very complicated system of getting help.
Right. So this is through Department of Veterans Affairs. So claims.
This is advocacy claims for compensation for it's not just about compensation financially. It's about helping them readjust to society. It's getting them transition to employment. Giving someone a pension doesn't make them feel like a worthwhile member of society with self-actualisation. I'm really all for trying to help people reintegrate into society, as opposed to saying here's some compensation. Sure, that is very necessary whilst you're healing, but I think ultimately we're talking about young men and women who you can't just not have them working from 25 to 70.
Retirement.
They've got to be able to contribute to society.
I think I read a statistic somewhere that 33% of people transitioning to civilian life are unemployed. Would that be a figure that you would think?
Absolutely. I mean, it is such a difficult process. My own husband left the military 2 years ago, and we have been in it since we were 18. So we've never had to look for a rental. We've never had to look for medical, healthcare, private healthcare providers. We haven't had to do that. And then all of a sudden we also have to find employment for him and, put our kids through school. And we didn't realise how hard it was. And it still is 2 years later.
Yes, right. Because I read somewhere someone said, from the minute you go in, you're told what time to get up, what to eat, what to wear, where to be at a certain time, and then suddenly you don't have any of that structure in your life anymore.
No, you don't. But there's also no one there saying, and I think there should be, when you leave the military, there's all these resources out there and they are there for you to take. But, you know, people don't know where to look. They're overwhelmed. They're lost. Some of them have PTSD. Some of them have injuries. A lot of us have had a lot of injuries and are, you know, on all sorts of medication, myself included. And so you don't know where to look. So I believe somebody needs to take veterans by the hand when they leave and say, look, I'm your case officer, for example. My name's Alison. Nice to meet you. Let's work through this. Let's go through the process. Let's help you with a job. And not just in the first 3 months when they leave, but somebody needs to touch base with these people, because PTSD, for example, they've done studies on it, hits you often 5 to 7 to 10 years, maybe longer, later. And then how do you ask for help then?
Right.
And where are you in your life?
So do you think that's kind of a failing of the system at the moment, that people are looked after more or less straight away, but then that long-term checking up, and unless they're involved in an RSL or something like that, they sort of slip through the cracks?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's all about feeling part of a community. You leave for example, myself, when I left Rwanda, you leave a very tight contingent where you've lived with people for 8 months, 24/7, doing high intensity kind of work, and then all of a sudden you're splintered all around Australia and you've lost your family. And so it's all well and good doing post-deployment and pre-deployment briefings, but you need to keep that up with these veterans or they'll just get lost. And then the monetary cost on the government is actually quite huge in pensioning people out, as opposed to helping them every year and touching base and saying, how are you going? Just a simple conversation. Can I help? Have you got a job? You know, how's your family? People forget it's not just about veterans, it's about their husbands, their wives, their children are affected by post-traumatic stress in a big way. They've done lots of studies on how they model the behaviour of their parents with post-traumatic stress, the anxiety and the stress you'll see in little children, because they're modelling mum and dad.
The intergenerational stress.
It's
exactly.
a huge cost on society.
Yeah, I spoke earlier to Mike, who is in the Harlaxton band, and he talked that these are all ex-military people.
Yes.
And it's that fellowship that they have with the
Absolutely.
band. So unless you're involved in something like that, you just...
Absolutely.
So
yes.
Alison, what's the answer to people joining up in the military? We know there's a fairly high chance that they might then come home with PTSD or
Yes.
sort of suffer not only physical injuries.
Yes.
What's the answer to that?
It's a very good question, and in my experience after 30 years post-deployment, I think, as I said, the answer is having, and it's not an answer, it's not something that will solve everything, but I think being able to, when you cut off from the military, provide support and a check-in, someone to check in on you, and make sure you're okay. And often that person is better off being a volunteer, to be honest, like myself, that has been there, done that, understands how you tick. I can go to the gym where I go and I can see people that are ex-military and I can say to them at the end, hey, how you going? Because I can just see that there's something not right because I've been there.
It's that lived experience.
It is that lived experience. And I don't think you can get a government employee, with all due respect, who are very well-meaning, and say, look after these people, because if someone gets irate on the phone to them, they can get irate back, whereas I can go, I get it, buddy. You know, I know what you've been through. I've lived it. And so I think the answer is touching base more and letting, when people get out, and letting maybe volunteers do that more easily, because even to become a volunteer is quite difficult.
Right, yes. Well, we talked with Mike about how people can, from the outside, if you're not involved but you want to help in some way, what's the role of just a normal community member that they can help?
My apologies.
So how can a normal community member help veterans if they're living next door and they think that they might need some help?
Do you know, I think it's about getting back to what we've known from 18, which is being part of a team. Everybody joins the military, not as a loner, they're a team player. You won't last if you're a loner. So I think having a hockey club and saying, hey, come to my hockey club and play hockey. Hey, come to the RSL and have a drink. Hey, come and have a drink. Drinking obviously is part of the culture in the military. I shouldn't be preying on that too much.
Come and have a cup of tea.
But come and have a cup of tea, that's a good one. But, you know, just getting people involved. And often with veterans, we close off and we don't want you become a bit of a hermit because you don't think anybody else understands those lived experiences. But that's, you know, if you can get out in society and join a sporting team, join a band, like Mike said, music's great for that. Just be part of the community, and if you can get veterans involved and make them, you sort of have to force them,
Right.
to be honest, because we'd all just rather stay at home and just do our thing, and you do become a little bit of a loner sometimes if you have post-traumatic stress.
Right, that's just such an interesting thing. You sort of and forcing people to do things in a good way,
I think so.
or a non-forceful way.
I think so, and I think sport is a big thing. You see, like CrossFit is a big thing for ex-military people, and it's just a community. It's another example of like being in the military. It's a community, and as I said, you know, my husband found hockey. That's a community. You've got to find that tribe that like you had in the military, and I think then you'll be okay. The people that I worry about are those that go off in their own little world, and that's when they have issues, and that's when the self-harm and the suicide that you were talking about before can occur.
I'll just remind listeners that they're in our segment called Big Little Small Talk, where we go out and talk to members of the community that are doing big things in our community. And today we're talking to Alison, who is a veterans advocate, and what that involves. Alison, why did you join the military? Did you come from a military family?
No, not at all. I went to a private co-ed school in Sydney, and we had cadets, and I wasn't even in cadets. But I was looking for, I guess, what you call a gap year now, to be honest. Something exciting, something challenging. I was a swimmer, so I liked the idea that it was big on sport. So I'd like to say I did it for my country, but to be honest with you, as an 18-year-old, I did it because it looked fun, you know. And so that's why I joined. And so I have no regrets from what I gained in the military as a young person. I think, you know, you'd learn some very good skills.
So no regrets?
No regrets as a young person. I think when you start to have a family, that's when you need to re-look at the military very closely, because it is very tough on families, and it is very tough on children when you have to say, look, we're moving. And
again.
And yes, and it's somewhat, I think the military need to grasp this, it's somewhat a little bit outdated where you expect spouses to just go, sure, every 2 years I'm going to change my job that I really enjoy, and I'm just going to move. Because we've all got careers now and all got worthwhile jobs, and so that's hard. So that's something that I think when you're a family, I think as a young person it's great, but you really do have to reevaluate things these days as family.
What's the average time people stay in the military, do you know?
I think it's about 6 years.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it used to be a lot longer, but again, like society now, you know, with jobs, you know, gone as my father worked for an insurance company for his entire life from 15 to, 55, but now everybody has those jobs every 6 years or more, and that's actually seen as a positive, not a negative. So I think now people are using the military as more of a springboard as a young person, which is an excellent idea. You go to ADFA, you get a great degree, you learn teamwork skills, you learn leadership. That's wonderful, but probably more now as a springboard. I think the long-term military is career is less and less going to be a thing in the future.
And you've got teenage children.
I do.
Are you, any of them, thinking about going into the military?
No, I have a 21-year-old who is a medical student, and yes, I say no, but I say no from my perspective, but yes, she would like to become a doctor in the army herself. I've remained on the fence with that. I haven't said anything to her, but I don't know. From what I've seen in Rwanda and the post-traumatic stress, and I would be reluctant, to be honest, for her to join as a regular member, as a reservist maybe. But I have an 18-year-old as well, and she has no desire to join the military, and my 12-year-old son has absolutely no desire, and both of those, the younger ones, they have no desire because I think they've seen the toll on life with mum and dad, whereas the older one was sort of off to boarding school and doing different things.
Right, a bit more glamorised.
I think so.
Yeah. Now, just quickly, shows like SAS, what do you think about that? Is it just a big hoax? It's nothing like that?
No, I don't think so. I think they still, I was watching that Jana Pittman the other day, and I was thinking, good on you. I think they still show you the values of teamwork, of working tough, working hard, leadership, and those people have a bit of grit, which military people do, because you won't last if you don't. So I think they're a good thing, because they show society that, you have to have something a little extra to make it work if you're in the military.
What about you? Do you think you'd ever say yes to having a go on a show like that?
No. No. After 20 years in the military, I am so broken. And that is another issue. I've had my... I won't even start on my injuries, but...
medical issues?
Yes, lots of medical issues, but no, definitely not. I would end up in an ambulance on the first show, so no, definitely not.
I saw Jana Pittman speak at a conference just recently, and I think she'd had a baby 5 weeks before that.
I know. She, I must admit, she was pretty amazing. So I had to just watch snippets of the show, but to get through med school knowing what I know of how hard that is with my own daughter, and to have 4 children while you're doing it, and then do an SAS show, she's done all right.
She's done all right. So now for you, are you going back to study to become an advocate, or what will happen?
So during the COVID thing, I sort of stopped seeing people. It was a bit difficult. I love being an advocate. It is really hard work as a volunteer, and I don't think volunteers are recognised enough in society at all. But as an advocate, I think particularly so when you've had your own issues with injuries, dealing with people all the time navigating the Department of Veterans Affairs system can become quite difficult. But I do love it, and I do find it extremely rewarding, and I love helping people, because if I could go back and help myself, 20 years ago, and somebody could have patted me on the shoulder and said, hey, those injuries, let's sort those out for you. It would have made a big difference to my life. So, I would like to do it. I've actually enrolled in a master's degree in social work because, I don't know, at nearly 50, I feel I want to do something that is really giving back and something that's really rewarding.
Well, Alison, I wish you all the best with that. It's just been such a fascinating interview to hear from your side, that lived experience, and hopefully people like you will be making a difference to the lives of veterans everywhere. So thank you very much for giving me your time today.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to talk to you.
Pleasure. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.